What do we need to see come out of COP26 from your perspective? Jennifer?
Yes, thanks. Great to be here with you. I think out of COP26, as you said, this is really a fundamental COP. There's COPs that kind of come and go, but I think this one is a much more important moment in history. I think there's four things that we need to see. I think the first is really a commitment to stop all new fossil fuel projects immediately, based on what the International Energy Agency is telling us, what the IPCC is telling us, and that can take different forms, which we can come back to, but I think that signal needs to be very clearly sent. The second is that all countries come forward with ambitious emissions cutting plans that would actually have global emissions, at least by 2030, with a lead by developed countries to be doing more in that space, but everyone coming in on that. The third is to reject the plans to open a global carbon market in carbon offsets. They're a scam, they don't work. And I think opening up that kind of a loophole in this agreement would undercut it quite fundamentally. And the fourth is really about solidarity with the most vulnerable countries around the world, the 100 billion commitment, moving that forward and increasing it, but also really addressing the loss and damage that is being experienced by people around the world. And that also needs to be addressed. So those are the four things.
Jason, your thoughts on what we need out of the COP?
Well, Jennifer, good to be with you all. And Jennifer highlighted several of them. This is a really important COP, a stock-taking one, where we see where we are in the Paris Agreement pledges, and the news in some cases is good, but in many cases is not. We are nowhere close to being on track for where we need to be. In the recent landmark IEA Net Zero report, the IPCC 6 assessment report, have really put into clearer focus how dire the climate crisis is and how short the window for action is.
Thanks for having me as part of this panel, and adding to what has already been said. You know, one way of looking at climate change and energy transition is that we're never going to succeed without both businesses leading the way and doing things differently. Consumer needs to change their own behavior, particularly in the richer part of the world. And then also governments needs to act differently. And of course, mainly the COP is an arena for the governments to sort out and negotiate.
There are some harbingers of the potential messiness or disruptiveness of what it looks like to transition the lifeblood of the global economy. I mean, there's no reason we should have thought over a fairly short time period of just a couple of decades at most, hopefully, we could take the fuel that powers the entire global economy, completely transition it and turn it on its head, and have that be smooth and predictable and linear. It's going to be disruptive. It's going to create volatility because we're going to have fits and starts, and policy ambition will move quickly and then it'll get pulled back. If we don't manage that process of transition and make sure that it does not affect affordability and reliability and security of supply, I worry that there will be a backlash against the ambition we need for climate policy.
What we're likely to see, which we're seeing, I think, somewhat, is the attempt by some in the industry to use this actually to, and I agree with, Jason, that you could see this kind of a slowing down because of this argument, or you could see it as another excuse to try and say we can't do this quickly. Yes, of course, it will take time, and absolutely it has to be a just transition, and absolutely it shouldn't be individuals in their homes who are having to pay more for this. But I think we have to be really careful. My hope would be that this would actually put more fire under decision makers to see why it's so important to implement the policies and the measures that are needed in order to make households more energy efficient, in order to make us more energy independent from fossil fuels and from gas and from oil and from coal. We would have an even more orderly transition if we had started as the scientists had told us about decades ago.
If you were to see some of the largest companies today deal with Scope 3 emissions simply by ceasing production, you would see the kind of market crisis, market crunch we're seeing in Europe now. You might see a backlash against this. You might see higher prices, and you may just see production shift to other producers, like the state-owned enterprises we talked about before. So all of this has to happen in tandem. The supply falls, the investment falls, and the demand falls.